What's up everyone, Tensei here, and today I'm going to be looking at my Zefra deck profile for the May 2018 format. I'm going to bring this deck to my locals tomorrow to test it out, and I don't think much will change, but because I've been testing this for a while now, but something might change, I don't know. Anyway, let's get on with the deck profile then, and yeah. So we have 3 Zefra. Zefra is the best monster in the whole deck, and mostly for this pendulum effect. Its monster effect is kind of irrelevant. Anyway, you need to run 3 in any Zefra deck, that's like mandatory. So, during your main phase, you can add 1 Zefra pendulum monster from your deck to your extra deck face up, and if you do, change this card's pendulum scale to be the same as that pendulum monster's until the end of this turn. And you can only use this effect once per turn. So this effect is important for a couple of reasons. First, this means you will most likely have matching scales at all times. If you have a low scale, like if you have 3 low scales and a Zefra for some reason, you just send the high scale with this, set one of your low scales with this, and then we come for the second reason why this card is so good. It sends them to the extra deck, meaning that you can pendulum summon them from there. So basically you can just pendulum summon using 2 cards, this and any other scale. Most pendulum decks need 3 to 4 cards for their plays, like to start their plays. But with this deck, this is just enough, and that's absolutely fantastic. Then Zefra has a monster effect. You tribute all your monsters, including at least 3 Zefras, to summon this from your extra deck. And after that you can conduct a second pendulum summon. Then you can tribute 1 monster to summon a Zefra from your deck. But with the advent of the extra monster zone, this is really bad, because Zefra will tribute all your link monsters, go to your extra monster zone, and then if you have anything left, you can only pretty much pendulum summon from your hand. That's not really optimal, is it? Anyways, our second best Zefra is Zefra Neo, Secret of the Yangzing. So with all the other Zefra pendulum monsters, they each share pretty much the same pendulum effect. You cannot pendulum summon monsters except monsters that share an archetype with this card. So in Zefra Neo's case, only Yangzings and Zefras, and this effect cannot be negated. So, Zefra Neo can add any Yangzing spell or trap card, or Zefra spell trap, when it's destroyed in the monster zone or pendulum summoned. So that's like really useful. Let's say you have Zefra and a low scale. You activate both of your pendulum cards, send Zefra Neo with Zefra. Now Zefra is a scale 7. Then you pendulum summon your Zefra Neo and add like a counter trap. Most likely you'll be adding a counter trap. So with just 2 cards, you get a monster and a counter trap. And then if you added 9 pillars can combo with Zefra Neo, and you get to add yet another card. This with just 2 cards, which are all pretty searchable. This is why I love this deck. Anyway, for our next monster we have Zefraxi, Treasure of the Yangzing. You can pendulum summon monsters except Yangzings and Zefras. Yeah, that's pretty basic. And Zefraxi here is your tuner access. When it's pendulum summoned or special summoned from the main deck, you can target a Yangzing or Zefra except this, and it's treated as a tuner for this turn. But Zefraxi will go to the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field. That's not entirely a bad thing either. So, with the levels in this deck, you'll most likely be going into level 6 and level 7 synchros, and sometimes level 9 synchros. This means you can use amazing cards like Metaphase Horus, Oda's Meteor Burst Dragon, and Chaofeng Phantom of the Yangzing. We'll talk more about those cards later, as well as all the extra deck cards. But one thing to note here is that since Zefra changed its scale only until the end of the turn, if you have a high scale and Zefrath, you can just send Zefraxi every turn and you won't ever run out of Zefras if you somehow go into the grind game. Most often I think this deck won't really take too long to finish. I mean, unless your opponent's playing a stun deck, that's always an option. But at that point, if you let them get all the advantage, you've already lost. Then, well, all the rest are one-offs as well. We have one Zefraxiton and one Zefra Thuban. So both of the Satellarknight Zefras pretty much do the same thing. They destroy one other Tellarknight or Zefra on your monster zone or your Pendulum zone when they're summoned. Well, normal flip or Pendulum summoned. And Zefraxiton destroys a set card your opponent controls. Zefra Thuban destroys a face-up card your opponent controls. So these aren't really like combo extenders or anything. They're just important one-offs. Sometimes you need to like clear your back row so you can safely Pendulum summon, or you might want to use Zefra Thuban to get rid of a Vanity's Fiend, Fossil Dyna, Imperial Order. Yeah, Imperial Order is fine. Yeah, I would not cut them entirely, but they're just fine as one-offs. Then one Zefra Wendy. You can Pendulum summon monsters except Ritual Beast and Zefras. And when it's normal or Pendulum summoned, you can add one face-up Zefram from your extra deck to your hand, except itself. And as it's a Ritual Beast, you can only special summon Ritual Beast and Zefra Wendy's once per turn. Now here's the important thing. You can only special summon these once per turn, but the effect is not once per turn. So if you first normal summon it, and then Pendulum summon it once it's sent to the extra deck, you can use its effect twice during the same turn. And that's really good, like on your second or third turn. It won't come up on the first turn too much, I think. But I really like Zefra Wendy now, with Master Rule 4 and all. Then Zefra Pilika, same restriction, only special summon, you can only special summon them once per turn. And when it's normal or Pendulum summoned, you can target a Ritual Beast or Zefra in your graveyard, except itself, and special summon it, but destroy it during the end phase. So this is one card I've been considering that I'd cut entirely, but I just feel like if I cut it, I will miss it. And I really like the play where I use Dragon Ravine, discard Zefra, and then Zefra and Pilika can revive the Zefra I discarded, making Ravine pretty much free. And it's also a really good recovery play if some of your Yangzings or Zefras are like in the graveyard for being Xyz material, like if you use Zefra New for Strike Bouncer or the Satellarknights for Tornado Dragon. So yeah, I could cut this to trim down the size, but I currently I don't want to cut it. Then we have the Mythical Beast engine. At first I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, I'm not sure if it's that amazing, but after testing them out thoroughly, I've begun to really like them. First of all, this means you have more access to Electromite, and Electromite's always going to make your plays better. So Master Cerberus is here to search for Jackal King and put itself into the extra deck with its Pendulum effects. So if you have no other cards in your Pendulum zone, you can destroy this, add a Mythical Beast. And this monster effect is also somewhat relevant, yes, I would say relevant. Not too often, but it has come up. So it gains spell counters each time a spell is activated, and you 2 spell counters specifically. And you can remove 4 spell counters on it, and banish a monster your opponent controls, and this card gains attack equal to that monster's attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. And this card can't be destroyed by card effects, right? Yeah, card effects. While there are 4 or more spell counters on the field. So that's not like going to come up too often, but let's say your opponent has a big monster, you can banish it, and this easily becomes at least 5,000. So if you have like a couple of monsters to back it up, that can pretty much just finish your opponent off. But yeah, I would not run it alone for that reason, but it's good to keep in mind. Then we have 3 Cerberus and 2 Jackal Kings. Jackal King's kind of the garnet here, but it's fine to draw alone. Because if you just Pendulum Summon from the hand, that's alright. It's another negate for your opponent's turn. So Jackal King can destroy itself in the Pendulum Zone and special summon a face-up Mythical Beast Pendulum monster from your extra deck, except itself. So this gets Master Cerberus back, and then if you have Darkworm or any normal summon, you just make Electromite. If you had the Darkworm, you just made Electromite without even normal summoning or Pendulum summoning. So that means you still have all your plays ahead for you. Ahead? No, ignore that. Anyway, so, and Jackal King also has a very important Pendulum effect. Each time a spell is activated, place 2 spell counters on this card when that spell resolves. And once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can remove 2 spell counters from your field, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So often I might have something like Zefra with a counter trap, possibly 2 counter traps, this. I don't know, Drone Dragster might be. Anyway, this is just 1 negate. And it can be pretty hard to deal with 3 negates or even more if you get like really optimal boards. Yeah, I'm rambling again. So 2 Darkworm, 1 gate 0. The thing is that I don't feel like I need 3 Darkworm, but one is not enough, because I always want to send it with Dragon Shrine. So if I draw my only copy of Darkworm, that's really sad. But the good thing is, Darkworm's not an awful thing to draw, so you can run 2 safely. It's not like a Garnet that does nothing in your hand. If you normal summon Darkworm, you can still add the gate 0, or if you have the Dragon Shrine, shrine the first Darkworms, normal summon the other, make Electromite, and you're good to go. So yes, this is the ideal ratio, I think. 0 is not the worst thing to draw, but I never want to draw it because I can just search it for free. And it does nothing by itself, it's just a pendulum scale. It doesn't. I can't normal summon it ever. So 1 is enough, and I never need multiples. This has worked just perfect for me. 1 Destrudo. You have easy access to Destrudo with your Shrines, Ravine, Foolish, and you play lots of level 7 Synchros. You can also make level 6 Synchros with this with the right board, or even rank 4s. If sometimes I just make Tornado Dragon with Destrudo, so it goes back to the grave for my next turn. I find it pretty useful, actually. Anyway, Destrudo, moving along. 1 Ash, 1 Ogre. This is pretty much a going first build, so I don't want to run more hand traps in my main deck. But because this deck can search hand traps with like Charge Warrior and Chao Feng, I want to run some hand traps in the main deck. And Ogre is pretty much very useful as a tuner as well. You can see I run Emergency Teleport. I'll talk more about it when we get there. Anyway, that's it for the monsters. I'll drink some water before we go with the spells. So, first we have 3 Zefra Providence. Zefra Providence is your searcher, so you will pretty much always have Zefrath. Like, if you're not counting really niche situations, you always get Zefrath. And as Zefrath is the best monster in the deck, that's what we want, right? Anyway, Zefra Providence adds any Zefra card, that's important. And if a Zefra card you control would be destroyed, you can banish this instead of all the Zefra cards that would be destroyed. Except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard. And that sucks a little, because that means you can just activate this, use Zefrath, and save it from an Ogre. But it's still not a bad effect. Let's just say that you end your turn, you have Zefra Providence in your graveyard, your opponent tries to remove your Zefrath, because obviously they don't want it in our Pendulum Zone, right? But unless, well, they might be using Cosmic Cyclone or something, but if they try to use Nightmare Phoenix, Twin Twisters, Zefra Providence will protect your Zefrath. for free basically. What's not to like? Then we have Oracle of Zefra, which has a lot of kind of unnecessary text for our build, but that's alright, because the effects we can still use are just really good. So when Oracle is activated, you can add a Zefra monster from your deck to your hand, and when you ritual summon or special summon using a Zefra monster as material, you can activate these effects depending on the monster summoned. Well, ritual pretty much lets you shuffle a monster on the field in your deck, that's irrelevant in the deck. Fusion lets you special summon a monster from your hand, that's irrelevant in the deck. And Synchro lets you choose a monster from your deck and place it on top of your deck. That's what we're here for. That's a really important thing. Now with this effect, you can select Ash, put it on top of your deck, and draw it with Electrumite or Charge Warrior. Yeah, that's the thing. We can search for Ash on demand, or Droll. Right now we're not maining Droll, but I think that I might need to do that in the future. If you use a Zefra for an Xyz, you draw a card, then discard a card. Basically Dark Whelp dealings. That's quite nice actually if you have something you want to discard, like Dark Worm or Destruder. Yeah, Destruder's name. Moving along, we have one Dragon Ravine. There was a point in time where I did not run Dragon Ravine, but it's just one more easy way to go into Dark Worm, and any hand where you get access to Dark Worm in grave is really good. So that's why I run the one Dragon Ravine. It also gives me the excuse to run triple terraforming, so that's good. Then 3 Dragon Shrine. Yeah, it sucks to draw in multiples, but I just want to really draw it. There's not much more else to say. I can send Destrudo or Dark Worm. Really good. Then triple terraforming. Now, if I did not run Dragon Ravine, I might just not run terraforming either. The thing just is that if I did not run Ravine and I ran terraforming, the hard ones per turn clause on Oracle of Zefra would really start to affect me. Now with the Dragon Ravine, even if I got like 2 Oracle and 1 terraforming, I search for Ravine, discard the extra Oracle, send Dark Worm. So this, and if I don't need the Ravine, I already have Shrine of Foolish, I can search for Oracle, and Oracle lets me add any Zefra monster. So this is just what I find that has worked the best for me. English is really hard at times. Sorry. Yeah, 1 Foolish Burial, pretty much the same. The difference is that you can send any Zefra monster to revive with Pilika. That does not come up often, but I thought I'd bring that up. 1 Emergency Teleport. Now, not everyone runs this, and I might cut it just to trim down on the space, but the main idea here is that it's another way to access your Electrumite, and if you already have access to Electrumite, Emergency Teleport can special summon your Ghost Ogre from your deck. So, because you really like making those synchros, that's not bad at all. And you don't even need to run anything unnecessary in your deck. I would run Ghost Ogre without Emergency Teleport, as well as the Ritual Beast Zefras. And the main reason why I want to run this is if my opponent flips an anti-spell, I can chain E-Tele, summon Ogre, normal summon level 4, make Black Rose, nuke their board, and no anti-spell. Now I can play again. Now, of course, they might have some other disruptions, but hey. Then you baited out something else, I guess. For the last spell, I have 3 Caught by the Grave. So this is just for hand traps, basically, but that's not all it can do, obviously. Some people run Cypherem Gear Gamma and prefer it over this, but I just... some people might just save the Ogre for Electrumite, and at that point Gamma does nothing. It's still a level 2 tuner you can basically summon with E-Tele, I guess. and you can make Omega with it, but then again the extra deck space is really tight in my opinion. So Called by the Grave is just usable in more situations, I think. And one niche application for it is if your opponent does not use a hand trap, you can just set this card, and if they try to activate any effect in the graveyard, you basically have an interruption with Called by the Grave. So that's why I like it a lot more than Cypher Gear Gamma in this deck. But Gamma is by no means bad, it has its own pros and cons, basically. This can't be used on your opponent's first turn, obviously. That's the biggest minus here. But I'm trying to go first, so basically I should be going first most of the time if I face some opponents that try to go blind second. Many Sky Striker decks want to go second, so I feel like I get to go first a lot of the time, if that makes sense. Anyways, to finish the main deck off, we have 3 traps, pretty standard for a Zefra deck. We have Zefra War, Zefra Divine Strike, and 9 Pillars. So, well, let's start with Zefra War. Zefra War lets you target the Zefra card you control and 1 card your opponent controls, and it destroys both of them. And if you have 2 Zefras in your pendulum zones, you can activate this card from your hand. And you can only activate 1 per turn. So this can really make use of your Oracle. Most of the time, your Oracle will not do anything once it's already like searched and stacked something on a turn. Well, of course it can like stack your deck again, but most of the time you'll have access to a new Oracle. So War destroying your Oracle that's kind of just hanging there freely is alright. And if you search this during your opponent's turn, you can activate it from your hand, guaranteed you have 2 Zefras. And that's actually something that used to come up really often. Oh, and finally, if you still have your Electromite on the board, destroying a Zefra in your pendulum zone will let you trigger Electromite on your opponent's turn proactively for a free draw. So keep that in mind, actually. I really love that play. Then we have 1 Divine Strike. When a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, banish 1 face-up Zefra monster in your extra deck, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. You will most likely have 1 Zefra at least in your extra deck that you used for like a synchro play or link summon. So it's always live, and it doesn't require you to control anything, unlike the second one. This doesn't have as much power as 9 Pillars, but it's more versatile. Anyways, as for 9 Pillars, most people probably know this if they've played Dance or Yangzing, Rip Denglong. So when a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated, when you control a Yangzing card, negate the activation, and if you do, shuffle that card into the deck, then destroy 1 other Yangzing card you control. So if you use this and destroy your Zefranio, Zefranio will actually trigger as long as 9 Pillars was Chainlink 2. If 9 Pillars is anything higher than Chainlink 2, Zefranio will miss timing, and that sucks, because Yangzings always miss timing and make life miserable. And yes, keep in mind, this card shuffles your opponent's card into the deck, so it won't trigger in the grave. So that means if your opponent activates like a True Draco Heritage or Purple Poison Magician, those were pretty much more relevant last format, I guess. Well, let's say your opponent activates Sky Striker Mobilize Engage, and you shuffle it back to the deck. Now they can't retrieve it with Kagari, and it won't count as a spell card in their graveyard. So I really love that. I think you might as well. So yes, the thing about these traps is that while they're very powerful, you never want to draw them. You always just want to search them, because if they're in your opening hand, most of the time your opening board will be a lot weaker than it could have been with just like playmakers. But yes, 1 of each is good for variety. Then let's go for the extra deck then. Need to drink again. So yes, well, I'll just fine. Oda's Vortex Dragon. Most people know what this does because of Pendulum Magicians. But just because we lost Astrograph doesn't mean we don't have access to this card. Actually, most of the time, even when Astrograph was legal, I was not using it to make this. I was using it for other things. So yes. Oda's Vortex Dragon is just another negate for any spell or trap card or monster effect. It can't negate spell effects already face up or in grave, but pretty much negate anything. And if your opponent already has something on the board, you can bounce something. So if you use Sphere Mode, you can return Sphere Mode. It's really more optimal with Kaijus, but I just don't think that Kaijus are enough this format, so I'm not running those. Well, that's not really even about Vortex Dragon anymore. So let's move along with Chao Feng, Phantom of the Yangzing. So Chao Feng is really good against Spiral and Night. Any Night medics. So Spiral or Gorky. Yeah, not against the Nightmares, but the Nightmare decks, Spiral and Gorky specifically. So while this Synchro Summon card is on the field, your opponent cannot activate effects of monsters with the same original attributes as the Yangzing monsters used for the Synchro Summon of this card. Keep in mind, that's not specifying on the field. They just can't use those, period. So your opponent can't activate any Gorky effect in the graveyard. They can't activate a Super Agent, Quick Fix, Double Helix, any Earth monster. Now, if you did run Zhaotu, the level 2 Yangzing Dark Tuner, you could even shut down any dark monsters, like Ray. Yeah, that's not relevant, but I don't run Zhaotu anymore. I used to run it to make Beals against Masterpiece, but without Masterpiece, I don't have any reason to use Beals or Zhaotu. Also, that's not the only thing Chao Feng can do. It not only locks down your opponent's Earth monsters against the decks I mentioned, and well, I guess some rogue decks as well. If Synchro Summon Chao Feng is destroyed, you can add any tuner from your deck to your hand. Ash is a tuner, Ogre is a tuner, Deshudo is a tuner, and if you ran Reaper is a tuner, so you can add hand traps if you destroy Chao Feng. Now, this also triggers if you destroy it by your own effects, like let's say 9 Pillars. So if you make Chao Feng and 9 Pillars, you can destroy your Chao Feng and add Ash. And that can be really devastating for your opponent if they really needed that one search. And if Chao Feng destroys a monster by battle, I can summon a Worm type monster from my deck in defense with the same original attribute. So, well, with the deck I have, that pretty much means that if you destroy an Earth monster, you can summon Zefra Neo or Zefraxi. Then we have another Yangzing Synchro, Yazi. Yazi can't be targeted, so if your opponent really uses a lot of targeting removal, Yazi can just make them unable to get... Yazi might be really difficult to get over for some decks if they rely on targeting removal. And Yazi can also destroy a Yangzing monster you control and one card your opponent controls. So if Yazi destroys itself, you can still trigger its last effect, where you summon a Worm type from your deck in defense. And this can also destroy a face-up Zefra Neo, and if it did not use its effect this turn yet, you get to search another card. So yeah, there's just lots of free advantage here. Well, kind of free. What's not to like? You just search for everything. More resources. Hooray. Meteor Burst Dragon. Meteor Burst Dragon is your main way to make Vortex Dragon through Absolute Dragon. But Meteor Burst alone is not bad either. If my opponent already had his turn, I might often make Meteor Burst, summon 0 from my scale, and make Absolute Dragon. Then go to the battle phase, attack with something, use Absolute Dragon's effect, detach Meteor Burst, summon Meteor Burst, and then run over something with Meteor Burst and Absolute Dragon. And Meteor Burst says that your opponent can't activate monster effects during the battle phase. Like at all. So, like, there's no floating. Sky Striker Ace Ray special summons itself from the grave if Sky Striker leaves the field. If you have Meteor Burst, it can't summon itself. It stays in the grave, so no free pluses for your opponent. And yeah, obviously Meteor Burst is good. That's the main reason why I run this. Then Black Rose Dragon. Black Rose Dragon, just a generic field wipe. Works really well with the red reboot if you can't OTK for some reason. Your opponent just makes the standard Altergeist plays like sets 4 cards or something. They try to activate anti-spell or any floodgate, chain red reboot, make Black Rose, destroy all the back row. Now they just have the Multifaker in hand doing nothing, and you still have like 3 cards probably. That's enough for a Pendulum Son of Zefra New to negate something. Yeah, you're just winning at that point if you did not OTK either way. And there's also the play with Emergency Teleport and Ghost Ogre I mentioned before. So yeah, definitely worth the one spot in the extra deck. Fresh from Flames of Destruction, we have FA Dawn Dragster as a generic synchro that's probably going to be used more in other decks than FA. So it's just a generic spell trap negation. You reduce its level by 2, negate a spell trap card, or even spell trap effect. That's something I was really surprised when I read this more carefully. And it does piercing damage too, so that might be relevant. Like if your opponent's trying to stall, or if they have like really low life points and can just finish the game with Dawn Dragster. Then we get to one of my favorite monsters in the deck, Metaphys Horus. I feel like this card's really underrated. Like, of course, like most Zefra decks run it. I don't think I've seen any that don't run it. But it's just that most decks can't really make use of the best effect of this card. And that's the Pendulum monster effect. So Metaphys Horus gains effects depending on the monsters used for its summon. So the normal monster effect is irrelevant. But if an effect monster is used for this card, I can negate any face-up card on the field. So I've negated a lot of diagrams with this card to more easily get over Masterpiece, and pretty much just prevent my opponent from getting more and more resources. But the Pendulum monster effect is that my opponent gives one monster they control to me, and this does not target. If they just have like one boss monster on the field, like even if it had targeting protection like Diabolos for example, my opponent just has to give the one Diabolos to me. And Sky Strikers often only have one card in the field, so I'll just take it for myself and use it for link material. Really fun. For the last synchro we have Stardust Charge Warrior, and this one is a combo card as well. So this card in combination with Oracle lets you search for any monster in your deck basically. And yeah, that's a free Ash. Or if you want to, you can add Destrudo and make a level 7 synchro with synchro climbing strategies. Yeah, I've been thinking about cutting it, but searching for hand traps just too amazing. We have only 3 slots for Xyz. 1 rank 7 Olea's Absolute Dragon for the Vortex Dragon combo. And, well, yeah, it does negate effects, but that's mostly irrelevant. Photo Strike Bouncer. Everyone knows what Absolute Dragon does already. There's really not much to talk about here. Photon Strike Bouncer is something that I'm kind of struggling with. Like, I do make it quite often, but it's just that I want to make some other rank 6s at times. Well, like, I feel like they might come up like Ptolemy Messier 7 or the new Vampire Xyz, Dampir. Dampir would work really well with Metaphys Horus, by the way, so if you want to run it, go ahead. I just don't have the space myself. Photo Strike Bouncer is just another negate for your opponent's turn, and it does little burn damage, might be relevant with the new match end of match procedures, I guess. Yeah, Photo Strike Bouncer is a negate rank 6. That's kind of the thing with it. And we have one rank 4 Tornado Dragon. This used to be an Abyss Dweller. You could run Baguska instead also. But Tornado Dragons it has worked for me really nicely. I feel like I go against back row decks so much, and this can just like tear apart your opponent's back row. And the fact that it's a rank 4 means that you can use Dark Worms as Xyz material. And that means the Dark Worms go back to your graveyard to be special summoned later if your opponent breaks your board. And then you can easily make another Electromite or a Synchro. It's just a Dark Worm in grave means better recovery for you. So yeah, we have 4 Link monsters. 1 Borreload Dragon. Borreload Dragon's just simply amazing. It's your best out your opponent's Borreload Dragon. And your opponent can target it with monster effects. So pretty much like Yazi, some decks might actually struggle with this. It has the attack reduction effect. That helps at times as well, I guess. And you can just easily make this with monsters you steal with Metaphys Horus and stuff. And it has good arrows. Everyone knows Borreload Dragon as well. Then we have Zefra Metaltron, and it actually synergizes with the deck a little because we're running a Zefra deck, and this is in fact a Zefra monster. So most often this just enables your Vortex Dragon combo, but one important thing to note is that Zefra Providence actually protects this one. So if your opponent tries to Raigeki you remove your Zefra Providence, and if something Zefra Metaltron was pointing to was destroyed, you can add a monster from your deck or extra deck to your hand. And that actually comes up often well, not often, but it does come up. It has come up a few times. And with Providence it's a little more likely, especially if my opponent does not read cards, and really, who reads cards in Yu-Gi-Oh? For the last Link monsters we have Heavy Metallophos Electromite. Obviously this is a Pendulum deck, Electromite is amazing. Now one thing I really like is that if my opponent uses Reaper, I don't auto lose either. Like, I won't lie, Electromite makes my boards better. But with all the easy synchro access without Electromite, I can play around Reaper. Ogering Electromite sucks, by the way, because that means you're already using resources, investing into the Electromite, and then you lose it. Like, that's really bad. But yeah, Electromite's good on itself. It's not good enough to run 3 copies. I only own 2, by the way, because I only need 2. Yeah, that's it for the extra deck. Now the side deck of course depends on the meta, and if you only play at locals you might need to adjust it to your own needs if you want to take inspiration from this build. But for my own use, I'm preparing for nationals, so I'm preparing to actually see some meta decks. Like, the meta around here might not reflect the actual meta on like bigger tournaments like the WCQ events in North America. Like, I don't think we will have that high levels of competitive play compared to like bigger countries, but I still think there's a few meta decks around, so that's what I'm preparing for. First of all, the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode is for all Nightmare decks. If I go second, I really need to have a way to get rid of my opponent's Trigate Wizard, all the Nightmare extra link things. And as discard normal summons itself, if your opponent summoned Iblis to your field, you can still make Sphere mode, summon Sphere mode. So Sphere mode's good. I used to run Kaijus, but I feel like Kaijus achieve a little... they don't achieve enough this format. Like, okay, I give my opponent a Kaiju, they still have 4 monsters on the field that can do stuff. Yeah, Kaijus are just not enough. 1 Ash, 2 Ogre. These are just if I'm going second, like if I know my opponent's wanting to go first and they lost the first game. Of course, I need more hand traps, so Ash is good, Ogre is good. I might replace Ogre with Veiler. That's actually really relevant. I think a Veiler might hit more cards this format, but currently I'm still running Ogre. It's a level 3 tuner, so there's some synergy with that level actually. Yeah, Ogre's Ogre. Droland Lockbird is just amazing against Sky Strikers. Especially if they run the Toon Table build and they start with Toon Table, you just use Droland Lock and now they have a dead Toon Table in their hand. They can't use Engage. They can't gain any advantage with Shizuku. Droland Lockbird also works against Gorky. It works against Zefra really well. I'm not prepared to, like, I don't expect to run into other Zefra players, but if for some reason I did, Droland Lockbird works against Zefras really well as well, and I hate the card for that, but it's just so good. Of course I run it even if I hate it myself. 3 Cosmic Cyclone for any back row decks, Pendulum decks. It's not as devastating as Droland Lockbird and Ras Sphere mode, but I just feel like I need to run it because against some decks, Cosmic Cyclone's just that good. And lastly we have 3 Red Reboot against Altergeist, Paleozoic Frog, and any Rogue Trap decks. Like, I feel like I face a lot of stun, and at that point I just want to have all the outs possible so I can play the game. So yeah, Red Reboot's good. You can generally OTK, even if you can't, you make Black Rose. You just auto-win against trap decks. Not much more to Red Reboot. Everyone knows what Red Reboot does. So, I hope I didn't ramble too much. I just wanted to be really thorough and explain all my card choices. Like, as I said before, I have a tournament this Saturday, that's tomorrow. So I might change some ratios around. Maybe if I figure out what to cut, I'll get the deck down to 40 again. But I haven't found any issue with 42 cards. Makes it easier to side like terraformings and ravines out too. So anyway, now I'm rambling. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you want more Zefra content. There's non-Zefra content coming as well. It's my favorite deck. I want to make more content about it. And yes, so see you guys next time. Tensei out.